Hey everybody, this is James Introcaso. Before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press, makers of many great 5th edition D&D products such as Tales of the Old Margrave, which is a 5th edition forest adventure that is on Kickstarter right now. So if you go to Kickstarter and search for Tales of the Old Margrave or Kobold Press, you will find it. What is Tales of the Old Margrave? Well, it's a full forest campaign. Forests and fantasy role-playing games are dark places full of secrets. The Margrave is an ancient enchanted forest that defends itself from those who cut its timber, poach its creatures, or steal its magic. Within the borders, the old ways are strong, and the word of the druid carries great weight, and griffins, dragons, and stranger creatures nest and hunt in the forest, which remains undisturbed by humans, dwarves, and other lordlings. Until your adventuring party shows up. That's when things get interesting. Check it out. Tales of the Old Margrave is an adventure campaign hardcover for levels 1 to 10. Plus, there's the Margrave Player's Guide. There are miniatures. There is so much awesome in here. You should totally check it out. And guess whose name is one of the names on the cover? That's right, me. So head on over to Kickstarter right now. Check out Tales of the Old Margrave from Kobold Press. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am talking with Phil Beckwith and Micah Watts, who have made their name on the Dungeon Masters Guild and now have a Kickstarter for Rex Draconis going. We are going to talk about what it is like to write in a published universe. I can't wait to share this conversation, so here it is. Hey everybody, now I am here with two of my favorite people. I am talking to Phil Beckwith and Micah Watt. Guys, let the people out there know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games? Phil, let's start with you. Welcome back to Tabletop Babble.
Thanks for having me back, James. So I'm Phil Beckwith from PB Publishing. Most people know me from my works on the DM's Guild. I also have a Patreon where I create maps. And most recently, I have been teaming up with Micah to produce the Rex Draconis RPG via a Kickstarter, which we launched a few days ago, and working closely with Richard A. Knack, that some people might know from his Dragonlance novels. It's his setting, and we're just playing around in it, making some cool products.
That's really, really cool. I am super, super excited to talk to you guys and super excited to get into it. But before we do that, Micah, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Thanks for having me, James, firstly. My name is Micah. I run Pyromaniac Press. I have adventures and supplements on the DM's Guild and on Drive-Thru RPG. I had a fairly popular product just recently with Alex Klippinger and Scott Bean in Faiths of the Forgotten Realms, so that did pretty well. That's probably my best-known product. And as Phil said, we've teamed up to look at Rex Draconis. Phil and I are actually from the same hometown, so as collaborations go, this one's actually fairly easy to manage. We can actually see each other face to face, as well as online, so that makes things easy.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good when you can see each other and talk together. That makes collaboration just so much easier because there's things you can't read through text. Like, is this a joke? Am I being made fun of right now? Well, gentlemen, I'm excited to have you. You are two of the best writers on the Guild. I really love the stuff that you both put out. We talked about Faiths of the Forgotten Realms. Micah, you couldn't join us for that conversation. What a glorious tome that is. And Phil, your adventures are definitely some of my favorite I've ever run in 5th edition. It's really, really great stuff. And I like that you all are always pushing the envelope. So I was super excited when I heard that you have this Kickstarter going on. And I wanted you to come on the show so we could talk about writing adventures in a published universe. But before we get to that, tell me a little bit about the Rex Draconis RPG. What is it exactly? What is this Kickstarter all about?
Well, let's start at the beginning with Richard A. Knack. So Richard is New York Times bestselling author. A lot of people in the industry, and a lot of people who are just fantasy fans would know of his work with Dragonlance and the Legend of Humor, Kaz the Minotaur, and the Minotaur, pretty much anything Minotaur for Dragonlance. He's also done works with the Diablo setting, the World of Warcraft setting, and his own setting, Dragon Realm, which are all fantastic as well. He crowdfunded his next series, which was Rex Draconis. He's since released the first novella for it. It's done really well. It's been a lot of great reviews on it, and he approached me to see if I wanted basically wanted the license to create adventures and content for his world for Dungeons and Dragons and for Pathfinder as well. I didn't know anything about Pathfinder or Kickstarter at all, and I knew that I wanted to kickstart this. So basically, I went to Micah and I asked him if he wanted to partner up, and we took it from there. So it's a new setting of Richard A. Nax. He's producing novels for it, whilst we're creating the RPG content and funding that via Kickstarter.
Nice. That's awesome. And Micah, are you also a fan of Richard's work?
Absolutely, I am. The Dragonlance books were the first I ever read in terms of branching out into novels as a child. And while I quite liked the Chronicles, I was absolutely hooked on the Minotaurs. When I first started playing RPGs, one of my first characters was basically a rip-off of Kaz the Minotaur. I loved it so much, and I followed his work ever since. So when Phil approached me, I mean, we'd been talking already, obviously creators in the same hometown, so we had a fairly good rapport. When Phil approached me and said that he'd been speaking to Richard Knack and there was this opportunity, I basically shelved everything else that I had on my future drawing board and said, yes, we'll definitely do this. So I was on from minute one. This is a fantastic opportunity. And we got to actually talk with Richard, obviously, is to discuss the nature of how we wanted to go about it and what he needed from us, and how to stay faithful to the setting while transporting it to a rules or two rule sets that obviously were not necessarily in the forefront of his mind when he crafted his story. And he's fantastic. He's so approachable and so open and so welcoming of our input and ideas.
Yeah, he's very collaborative as well in the way he goes about it. I mean, we're creating things in his world, and he's taking some stuff on board and moving forward with that in his novels too, which is absolutely incredible, to be honest.
That's awesome. Well, you two are writing in a published universe. You've obviously written material for other published universes working on the DM's Guild, and I think this is a great opportunity to talk about that, because we have all kinds of opportunities in RPGs to work with materials that are already published, right? Be it the Cthulhu mythos that everybody seems to be writing in these days.
Guilty as charged. I'm doing a little bit of that myself, actually.
I mean, it's great. It's full of great stuff to draw upon, right? In the DM's Guild, we have the opportunity to draw on Forgotten Realms, which isn't just a bunch of RPG books, but there's also novels and other source material to go through from there. There's, same thing with Ravenloft and Eberron now we have as well. So there's a lot of opportunity. And, you never know when you're going to find yourself working with a license like Marvel, right? Maybe you're writing an adventure set in your Marvel RPG or whatever. So there's tons of opportunities for that. How do you get started with something like this when there's so much source material to go through? So, like, how did you get started with Rex Draconis? Like, where do you dive in?
Read it. Read the first novels. It's probably my best piece of advice. There is start where it all began. That's really where people took off on it. That's where people fell in love with these settings, and from there you can really grow with it and get that sense of love with it as well.
Yeah, you talk about Ravenloft and Forgotten Realms and so forth, and there is just so much source material for that. And I'm not sure you could actually read it all, but definitely you need a grounding. If you're going to be playing in someone else's world, you need a grounding in it. And luckily, Rex Draconis is relatively new. Only one novella so far, but the second one will be released shortly, and I believe the plan is a trilogy of novels to come after that. So we're very lucky in the sense that we got in on a growing, budding world that still has a lot to be filled out. But the core thing for me is if you're going to write in somebody else's universe, you have to know enough about it to capture the spirit of that and be true to it, even if it's Ravenloft or Forgotten Realms.
Especially if it's going to be considered canon for that setting as well. Just reflecting on what Micah said, you really do want to know what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, you want to know what your source material is about, and you want to know like the big themes and the big feelings if you're going to dive into something. For instance, let's say Dragonlance opened up on the DM's Guild today. There are over 100 Dragonlance novels. You're going to have a hard time if you want to read everything. So I think that's totally true, that for something more established, sometimes that's been around and has all of these contributors and various forms of media to consume, right? It'd be even harder if somebody was like, hey, come write the DC Comics RPG. You would never. You would spend your whole life researching if you wanted to read everything before you started. So yeah, I think that's totally true. And it also sort of brings me to my next question, which is, what is important for role-playing games, right? Like, what is the important thing to get right there? Because people are going to go in there and create their own stories and use your adventures or your campaign or your source material to do their own thing. Are we trying to tell stories that have come before? You know, if I'm playing the Lord of the Rings role-playing game, should I be trying to destroy the One Ring? What's your opinions on that? And Micah, why don't we start with you?
I think trying to recreate your favorite moments is a little bit of a trap. And I think that actually bore out when we're just speaking of Dragonlance, when the first Dragonlance adventures were brought up, they followed the path of the original characters. And if you've read the books, you sort of know either what's going to happen or what's supposed to happen. And I think there's a little bit of, pressure there to remain faithful, but also it kind of stifles creativity. I think what you really want to do is know that those events have come to pass, or even have them in the background somewhere, but let people write their own stories in a meaningful way that interacts with a setting that they love.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Phil, how do you feel?
Micah answered it for me, to be honest. Look, I agree, especially with Micah's example there with the old DL1 Dragonlance modules. They were very much, well, I think the modules came out before the books, or they played the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman had played the modules first and then started writing the books. So they were very closely tied in terms of their story arcs and what was supposed to happen there. And I agree that it's a trap is probably one of the concerns that people have with those original modules. That's something we're trying to not do so much. We've really nipped that in the butt by setting our adventure that we're writing for the Rex Draconis setting as a prequel to the novels or the novella that's out at the moment. So it's set, I don't know, I think it's a couple of months before the happenings of Under the Dragon Moon. And what that allows us to do is tie in bits and pieces and foreshadow into the novella itself, because we know where those bits and threads and story threads are meant to end up, so we can write around that quite easily.
I totally agree with both of you all, but I also fall into this other trap, which is I, as a GM, and I think a lot of people, not everybody, like to tell the cool story about the heroes saving the world, right? And so if we can't, like, often that's the story in the novels or the movie or the comic books or whatever it is, right? So how do we make the hero's journey still feel special, still feel important, right? Like if we're playing in Star Wars, okay, so we don't want to go blow up the Death Star, right? But like, how do we still make the journey that the heroes, the player characters are taking important and significant when, hey, Luke Skywalker's blowing up the Death Star and saving the galaxy?
I definitely think there's ways to do that, though, and Phil and I have been talking about this in terms of how to present the adventures for Rex Draconis. We're looking at shadowing the events of the novel in meaningful ways. So, not to give too much away about the book, but there is a backdrop of war occurring in the main action of the novels, and the novel characters are doing what they need to do in order to further the story in the face of that. We're almost presenting a parallel story where the player character's actions have just as much impact in many ways, even in the same places. There's going to be a scene in our adventures where in the novels a particular city is attacked, and the novel characters are in the thick of the action in one area of the city. Our player characters will have the option to be in the thick of the action in another area at exactly the same time. So they still get to participate in the giant battle. They get pivotal moments. They get to feel like they're also saving the city at the same time, and it connects it to the main storyline. We're also seeding in the NPCs, so players will get to interact with their favorite novel characters, hopefully, again, in ways that is fulfilling. They've read the novels, they like a certain character, their characters can interact with them in a way that makes them feel like they're contributing. I think in a large enough fantasy world, there's going to be lots of options for there to be, I guess, maybe unsung heroes. What's going on in the background when the main novel heroes are taking on the epic bad guy, or attacking the Death Star. Perhaps in these other adventures, the facilitation of that is done by characters that just never really get the limelight, much like Phil said in terms of Rogue One. We're going back and setting the scene for this other story to take place. And if the player characters, the players aren't successful, well, in that iteration of the world, the heroes may not succeed.
Yeah, that's very true. I actually, thinking about that, I always want to play a Star Wars role-playing one-shot where everybody is a Bothan, and you have to steal the shuttle Tiderium from Return of the Jedi, and you all die at the end, but you complete your mission, right? Like that. I do think that there's some really cool threads left hanging, even when you have these rich universes that have decades of history and that sort of thing. And there are pockets where, like, the bigger the world is, the more story you have that you can go in with players and tell stories, and the more developing too the world is, which is really cool. Phil, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, definitely. Look, like you're saying, the bigger the world, the more opportunity there is to have loose ends, and every loose end has potential to be a story. Even in Richard's novella, there's plenty of loose ends and plenty of little threads that we can pull on and really start to weave into larger stories and things like that. So there's really a lot of room to move in, especially in a setting that's as well thought out by someone with a mind that's absolutely incredible in terms of creativity. For instance, we just ask Richard, like, what happens here, or why is this, and or what's the name of this, and he'll give us a name, and he'll give us also a history on it as well. He's got everything already up in his head, and then we can also seed him ideas and things, and he'll just build on those. And before long, we've got so many open-ended questions there, which we can then build on and create a story from.
Yeah, that's really, really great. I love that. And when you're working, not everybody has the luxury of necessarily working like directly with the author like that, which I think is great. How much freedom, I guess, would be the question, are you given? Is he like, hey, these parts of the world are mine, do whatever you want over here? Like, how's your arrangement work? Is he checking over everything you're doing? What's the sort of story with that?
Pretty much everything that we do. We're in day-to-day contact with Richard. We're chatting pretty much nonstop. I swear that Richard never sleeps. So he's really approachable, is what I guess I'm trying to get at there. And what I usually do, and Micah and I usually do, is we'll write something and we will throw it to him to look over or give a thumbs up, basically canonize what we're doing. Or he'll ask us to change something because something else is impacted by that, which he already had in mind, and that obviously that's fine. And so we'll just edit as we go. It's really a sort of give and then take back and give relationship there, which I think is pretty necessary for this kind of work, especially when what you're doing is going to be considered canon.
Yeah, definitely. And it's great to have the author's voice like that, and to have someone who's so accessible. It sounds like Richard is really great about being in touch with you all. That's great.
Yeah, look, just to add to that, for an author that's been around for as long as he has and done so much and his work is so varied, you could probably forgive someone like that for having a bit of an ego or being a little bit precious about their worlds and their creations. But there's just nothing like that in Richard. He's such a flexible, humble, creative guy, and never once has he said no. When we've come up with an idea, he, like Phil said, he'll say, well, actually it doesn't quite fit because of this, but we could do this instead. He's giving us an amazing amount of freedom, and we're incredibly lucky. I'm not convinced that anyone else would allow two complete strangers this much freedom in their world with this much grace. And it's a genuine collaboration, and we're very, very lucky. This has turned out to be an amazing working relationship. There's no friction. It's a genuine, respectful exchange of ideas, and ultimately, between the three of us, we come to a resolution. It's Richard's world, so Phil and I are extremely respectful of that, and everything we try to propose is within the bounds of what we know of his world. But occasionally we'll push something a little bit outlandish just to see where he'll come down on that. But even with redirects, he still takes our ideas on board, and he's quite willing to add or change or build with us so that we can make this fit. And that's it's an amazing experience. I think we're going to be a little bit spoiled if we try to do this again with another author, because Richard has really set the bar high. He's amazing to work with.
Yeah, you are very lucky to have that sort of freedom and working relationship with your author. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of the stories you're telling are not the same exact story he's trying to tell, right? I think if you were trying to tell the story of Rex Draconis, the novels, it would probably be like, well, that's not actually how it happens in the novel. It has to happen this way if you want to tell the story of the novel. Hey, everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Archvillain Games. Archvillain Games is having a Kickstarter from October 1st to the 30th selling character sheet gauntlets, which are binders for your character sheet, and they are beautiful. I got to preview these things at D&D in a castle. They're amazing, they're custom made, and they make your character sheets look awesome. They have a patent-pending design. They are made to go with 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons character sheets. They have figurine-level detail. These things are incredible, and it makes your character sheet the most beautiful thing at the table. There are detailed covers for the fighter, rogue, cleric, and wizard. Each one can hold up to 5 character sheets. They're available painted or unpainted, and they have high durability because they are ABS injection molded plastic. Over $40,000 was spent on the design and prototyping here. Plus, there's paint kit add-ons available from Army Painter. Check it out. You can get the most important details of your character with the cover closed on this thing. And then you can open the cover to access the full sheet on the front, turn it over to access the complete sheet on the back. Use a blank sheet of paper or a standard 5e character sheet designed to lie flat on the table and bend nicely with terrain. There's a sliding tray that holds your character sheet and snaps into place so you will never lose it. These things are so beautiful, and I bet you will see some more awesome sheets if they hit these stretch goals. Head on over to archvillaingames.com or search for them on Kickstarter to grab your Archvillain Gauntlet today. You will not regret it. We're spending a fair amount of time talking about adventures, but you're doing way more than adventures. Let's talk a little bit about what is in this Kickstarter. What do people get if they back?
Primarily, the Kickstarter focus was on getting out the first adventure to allow people to have something to run and play and so forth. But the other main parts of it include a player's guide, a way of basically interpreting and marrying the rule sets of 5th edition and Pathfinder to the core concepts of the world, because Rex Draconis was not written based on Dungeons and Dragons classes particularly, or Dungeons and Dragons races. So there are new and novel races. There are ways of interpreting magic, for example, that are not the same as the rule sets. So the whole idea behind the player's guide is everyone who's going to be interested in this knows that it's being built for those rule sets, so they understand those rule sets. They'll have their favorite D&D or Pathfinder. The player's guide is a way of basically helping them interpret that so that they can either make the changes they need to have the genuine Rex Draconis experience, or they can see what the differences in the novel line world is and then make the alterations to make it their own. For example, Rex Draconis does not have orcs, and so that will be a note in the player's guide that, orcs and half orcs, which are normally player selectable races in the rule sets, are not Rex Draconis canon. But if people want to play orcs and half orcs and make Rex Draconis more to their own liking, well, that's available to them as well. So that's a bit of a guidebook to marrying it to the rule sets. And the other book we're doing is a guide to Avondale, which is the main city in Darkoma, and that houses the Orders of the Knights. And we're basically creating this city setting to give players and DMs a place to start to build their own stories. The first adventure will commence there, and then takes the characters on a journey across the world to discover the foreshadowing events for the novels. But we want to be able to give players a playground, a place to start to launch their own adventures. So, and finally, I guess on top of that, we also have just a little mini adventure called Misunderstandings, which is basically a way of showcasing some of the very specific elements of Rex Draconis that I think a lot of people will enjoy. It's just a little mini adventure that brings some of these disparate elements together, but gives you a little bit of a taster. This is what you can expect from the world. So there is quite a lot of content, and while we want to set people on the path of adventure and give them, a tie into the books, we also want to give them a grounding so that they can do what they want with the world. We don't want to straitjacket people. We want to open up this amazing world for them.
Look, especially in the adventure, we are focusing a lot on the overworld or overland and at sea, especially travel, including a weather system. It's got different areas which have different kinds of weather, different types of weather there, different kinds of creatures in these areas, different cultures, things like that, as they can move through these areas. So there's quite a lot of content coming.
Wow. It's really, really impressive what you have going here. And as a side note, your prices are ridiculously cheap. These are a real deal for people who want to get in sort of on the ground floor. They are really, really good prices. So if people have any interest at all, I recommend checking it out, because this work is so good that both of you have done. And you're not just adventure writers, you've done player options and things like that. And this seems like jam-packed, filled with lore and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering, when you sit down then to write books about different pieces of this universe that Richard has created, are you how much of his stuff are you using? How many things are you going like, oh, we need there's sort of only a couple sentences about this thing. We really need to expand it because we want to use it for X, Y, or Z. How do you go about doing that and still maintaining the feel of Rex Draconis?
I think a lot of that comes down to knowing the author's style or Richard's style. Both Micah and I obviously have been long-term fans of his, and now obviously knowing him on a personal level as well. A lot of it does come down to that. So we get the idea and the feel, the themes that Richard would usually go for, but then we also bounce that off him as well. So we say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking, this is the sort of direction that we want to go in. And again, he'll say, that's great, yep, I like that, but how about this as well? And we say, oh yeah, that's perfect. It really keeps those themes in check, I think, rather than it taking on sort of a life of its own, which is always, I guess, a danger when you're bringing external people into the world to write for it. So keeping up that relationship is probably the most important thing there for us.
Yeah, look, I completely agree, and along those lines, as I said earlier, Richard's been extremely accommodating, and he's released to us a series of I guess journal articles, world building articles that do set a framework for us to build on, and they're reasonably detailed, but also if we read a few things into that, we throw questions at him. What does this mean? Or what's the connection to this? Or you said this here, and how do these two things interact? And he, very quickly always has an answer. I mean, there's clearly a plan there. And with the adventure, we try to get sort of, people hit the ground running and get into it. But we also want to seed in some of the lore of the world as well. So, as the characters journey to lands unknown, they're also picking up some of the lore and culture as they go. They're learning it organically. So rather than being force-fed this huge setting supplement, if they follow the adventures, a lot of that stuff will come naturally. And in one particular scene, they're on a ship, and they've had to earn the trust of the first mate, who is a Minotaur. And if they do so through their actions or their attitudes, and they earn his respect, he actually gives them a myth tale from Minotaur culture. And so I sat down and I had this great idea, and I wrote out this myth tale. And then the first thing I did was ship it to Richard and say, is this okay? Is it terrible? Can I keep some of it? Do I need to gut the whole thing? And again, he looked it over and he said, well, that's in the wrong place, and that didn't happen at that time in the history of the world. So you need to change that date. And geographically, you just need to account for, this, that, and the other. But he was extremely receptive to that idea. And so I essentially pitched him a slice of history of his own world, and he just picked apart the things that he didn't think fit, and then helped slot it in. So, like I said earlier, I mean, he's not precious or egotistical about this. He's extremely open with us about letting us play in his playground, and we're I think because of that, we're very respectful about writing in a way that we think is true to his ideas, and historically, how he writes, as Phil said, we're fans. So we've been consuming his content most of our lives. We get a fairly good understanding of how his stories tend to pan out. So we're very cognizant of that, and at every turn it's what would Richard do? What would Richard like? While putting our own sort of spin and ideas into it. So it's an amazing give and take. I still pinch myself every so often, because if he was super restrictive, we'd still want to do this. It would just be a hell of a lot harder.
What's interesting is you've been reading Richard your whole life, but you said earlier that he didn't really know you all. How did he find you all to get started on this? And I mean, I guess it's clear how he sees the value in role-playing games if he's written for Dragonlance, but still, how did he find you guys?
Yeah, so that starts with me. I wrote a trilogy for the DMs Guild called the Minotaur Trilogy, and in the first one, Minotaur's Bargain, pretty much cold called him, and I just said I would love a foreword for my adventure. It's all about honorable minotaurs, and he said, "Yeah, look, I do it, but obviously I'm a paid writer, so it'll cost this much." And I was like, "Yep, that's completely fine." So I hired him to do the foreword for it, and it was excellent. But through that process, he got to know my work. He read the adventure. He wrote his foreword for it, which was great. I published it, and then I didn't really hear anything from him for a little while. Another DM Guild creator, Patrick E. Pullen, I think you probably know him as well, James. He brought me on as one of the lead creators on his Dark World setting. He's also an avid Dragonlance fan like myself, bit of a tragic like me too, and a big Richard Anak fan too. And he managed to hire Richard to write a short story for his setting, which we're working on as well, and there'll be a Kickstarter in the future for that too, so watch out. So we started collaborating a bit more there. Then Richard released the first Rex Draconis novella, which was crowdsourced, and I was one of the early backers for that too. He approached me because he knew my work and he wanted someone to create the RPG content for his world.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool.
So it really opened the doors. Yeah, it was amazing. Couldn't believe it.
Nice. That's great. Well, and it just goes to show you should reach out to people that you want to work with and see if they'll work with you, because you might be able to hammer out a deal. So you all mentioned this earlier. You're doing D&D, but you're also doing Pathfinder. Which are you starting with, and then are you converting things over? Or are you just sort of starting from scratch for the mechanics for one or the other? Is this Pathfinder 2 material? How's it working?
Micah is the Pathfinder guru in this team. I have no idea about Pathfinder, to be honest.
Yeah, look, we are going to start with D&D simply because both Phil and I are very conversant with the rules. Once we're happy with the story, which the story is pretty much system agnostic. So, and that's a big benefit of, again, writing off a novel world where a system wasn't really conceived as part of the story. So the mechanics aren't tied to it. As a writer for, say, DM's Guild, for example, when you are constructing your adventures, you construct the story and the mechanics together. And often, you'll choose a monster or you'll choose a location or a trap, knowing how the mechanics work and how it will blend into the story. But when we come from a backdrop of having a novel which doesn't fit either rule set particularly, our story becomes system agnostic, and we'll fit it to 5th edition first because we can both write that together and collaborate on that. And then afterwards, I will convert that to Pathfinder. I've got a reasonable amount of experience with that. On Drive Through RPG, I'm sectionally releasing an adventure arc in both systems. So I have a fair bit of experience going from one to the other. And they are actually surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly, considering they come from the same source, very similar. There's not too much that is completely out of alignment with the systems. The spells are very similar. The monsters similar and of similar power. So Minotaurs in 5th edition and Minotaurs in Pathfinder are approximately the same mechanical toughness. There's not a great deal of difference there, for example. So we'll write 5th edition first. We'll convert to Pathfinder. Given that the Pathfinder playtest is still underway, I will not be attempting to convert to a rules system that is incomplete. So it will be Pathfinder 1 to begin with. And once they have completed Pathfinder 2 to their satisfaction, their playtest is complete, they've made all the changes they want to make, we'll revisit that. I'm definitely open to converting to Pathfinder 2. And look, if there's an appetite for it, there's no reason we can't look at other systems that allow it with an open or limited license. So again, with an system agnostic story, you can produce this in multiple rule systems without too much trouble once you know what you're doing.
Well, that's right. So you're just looking at different situations that the story is leading into, and then look at the system that will support that, and how you'd go about that in any particular system.
Yeah, that is a process, and you guys are going to be doing some amazing work there. Mike, it sounds like you're going to be doing a lot of that conversion work, which is awesome. But it sounds like you're both really focused on the lore at the moment. And I want to ask you, how are you structuring things so that other DMs can come along and write adventures in Rex Draconis that feel like they belong in Rex Draconis, right? So, for their home games and that sort of thing. I think that's one big thing these sort of world books need to do well, right? Is provide information so that people can create their own adventures, because we know people love to do that too. So how are you structuring things so that they entice people to make their own stories in this world?
Obviously, we're very lore oriented at the moment because we're writing the story at this point. But when we start looking at the overall setting book, which will be a product that'll come in a future Kickstarter, and we've got the license for another 3 years at this point. So we've got 3 years of building in Rex Draconis, right? We'll look at that further down the track. But I think in order to make it so other people can, or other DMs can create their own stories in this area, we really need to give a lot of direction in terms of themes. I think they're very important when it comes to setting specific things. Also, giving small adventure seeds and things like that, giving ideas that will hopefully trigger some creative responses for those DMs and help them drive their stories into those kinds of directions. Then we'll also have some rule specific things which will be a bit tighter in terms of things like a magic system, certain races and how they interact with each other is important, and how the different areas I guess are run, and again back to themes, the different themes in the different areas in the setting can help a lot with there.
That is a great way to get people interested in playing games in your world. Micah, what about you?
Yeah, look, I think Phil covered it off fairly succinctly. I think the model we're working with here is this first Kickstarter is really a bit of a pilot to see if this is a setting that people are interested in, and that it's viable. And we believe it is, otherwise we wouldn't have sought to undertake it. We think there's a lot of value in it. It's got a great Richard Nack style to it, and anyone who loves his books will love this setting. It's got some very familiar themes that people will see throughout much of his writing, and it's got some new elements, some very unique and novel things that go with it. What we would say to people is we would encourage them to actually read Richard's novellas. I mean, they're quite small and short and cost effective, and while they're not actually directly part of the Kickstarter, they do give everyone a great grounding in the world. But in terms of what we're doing, we're really trying to ease people into it. I mean, we could have started with a massive setting book that we took 2 years to write, and fleshed out the world completely, and spent a lot of back and forth with Richard doing. But we looked at that and thought, well, that's going to take a long time to do, and it doesn't allow people to get their feet wet and actually play in this world that the three of us are sitting around really enjoying, and holding that back for an extended period of time while we try to perfect it is not really giving people opportunities. So a city setting guide gives people a place to start. Lore seeded through the first adventure means that they get a sense of the world from an organic perspective. We're not just giving them a big block of text. In this world, you will find, bam, this, two or three pages on one subject, 10 pages on another subject. That's pretty heavy reading. So the adventure offers lots of insight into the world and its unique features simply by playing through it, and that way, the lore and the themes and the style all get meshed in with actual play, and I think that's in many ways, the best way to get people interested is they play it, they live it, they're part of it. It's as collaborative as you can get. And as they go along and as they build their characters through the path that we offer, which has lots of opportunity for variation and exploration, hopefully they'll get as hooked on it as we are. And if this Kickstarter is successful and 3 days in, we're very comfortable with how it's traveling. If it is successful, then we'll be able to add more and more and build quickly and add new areas and new setting content and work up to the bigger, larger, sort of more expansive book, but still give people a chance to play and get a taste of it early.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is going to be a really great thing. And if people want to find out more about the Kickstarter and also find out more about both of you, where should they go and what should they do? Phil, let's start with you.
If anyone wants to get in touch with me, feel free to come and have a chat. I'm always happy to have a chat about anything within reason, especially RPGs. I love my RPGs. You can find me on Twitter at PB Publishing 1, or you can hit me up on my Facebook page, P Publishing. Or you should. It was a typo on my behalf when I was creating the Facebook page. So it's just facebook.com/ just search for me. You'll be able to find me and just come say hello. Or you can find us on the Rex Draconis RPG Facebook page as well. There's lots going on there. We're always putting out updates and asking questions and bits of content here and there as well as things become available. So there's lots going on.
I am, same with Phil. I'm extremely approachable. I love to talk to anyone that wants to talk RPGs. So by all means, everyone hit me up. I am found on Twitter at Pyromaniac Press. I have a website, which is pyromaniacpress.com. I can be found on Facebook at Pyromaniac Press. No fancy alterations for me. I'll stick with the one theme that works really well. And but as I said, as Phil said, with Rex Draconis, there's a Rex Draconis fan page. There's a Rex Draconis page, and those mostly key into Richard and the novel line. The Facebook page for the setting is actually called Richard A. Knack's Rex Draconis RPG setting. If you just type in Rex Draconis, there's lots of options. And if anyone wants to back the Kickstarter, again, you can simply search Kickstarter for Rex Draconis RPG. Please back the Kickstarter and bring this to life for everybody. The Kickstarter itself is and James touched on this, it's a fairly modest goal budget, and all of the backer levels are very reasonably priced. We did this deliberately. There's no profit margin in this for Phil and I. If we fund, it all goes into the production quality of the books. And at this stage, all of the stretch goals are about putting the money back in to get better art and higher quality print and higher quality books. So we're extremely keen to get this off the ground because we're fans, and we hope that other fans out there will see this as an opportunity and come along with us on this ride.
Wow, that's incredible. Your passion for this is definitely evident. Thank you both so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Thanks for having us, James. It's been a pleasure.
Wow, that was a great interview with Phil and Micah. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. This podcast needs your help to grow, so head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review so other people can find us. If you leave us a 5-star review, I will read it out loud here on the show and credit the person who left it, like Cryptolos, who is from Belgium, who says, "So much inspiration. This podcast is so great. I always discover new things such as new games, new podcasts, online conventions, and just lots of interesting things to think about. I'm from Belgium and would like to hear an episode about RPG players in Europe." Oh, that sounds awesome. And I don't know if you've already covered it, but an episode about play-by-post gaming would be very interesting also. Thank you. Keep spreading the good word. Well, Cryptolos, thank you so much for this. You've given me some awesome ideas, so thanks for returning the favor there. I think a Europe-inspired episode would be really great. A game about RPG players in Europe. Sounds pretty cool. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's JamesIntrocaso. Plus, check out my blog, World Builder Blog, where you can get all sorts of updates about the game design stuff I'm doing. It's over at worldbuilderblog.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. If you're going to do it on a table, make sure the table is very sturdy. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick second to let you know that this podcast was brought to you by Elderwood Academy. Elderwood Academy makes amazing game products. They are really, really awesome. Everything from rolling trays to dice boxes to my favorite spellbook game boxes, which are these highly customizable, leather-bound, amazing wood-finished boxes that carry your dice, your minis, your cards, your pencils. They have a mirror inside that you can write on with dry erase marker. You can customize them with these awesome sigils. They are just so very good. Plus, there's dice towers on this website. You can check out Dice Catapult Kit, which is awesome. There's just so many great things for you to check out. So head on over to elderwoodacademy.com and see all the amazing handmade wood objects they have that are going to be beautiful things for you to have at your gaming table. Seriously, my Elderwood Spellbook gaming box is the thing I get the most compliments on whenever I show up to a game with it. So you are really going to want to check these out. Oh man, there's even key rings so you can carry your dice around on your keys. You'll never be caught without your dice. You can play at any time. That's awesome. Head on over to elderwoodacademy.com. Go buy some awesome stuff and let them know that Don't Split the Podcast Network sent you.